Deep under the blue waters of Jeju Island, there lived a young mermaid named Hei-yun. Her home was a beautiful palace made of pink coral and white pearls. Unlike other mermaids who spent their time collecting shiny shells and precious stones, Hei-yun loved to swim close to the surface of the ocean and watch the rain fall. Every morning, Hei-yun would wake up in her soft seaweed bed and swim to her window. Her room had a perfect view of the surface world above. The sunlight would shine through the water, making pretty patterns on her walls. Her long silver tail sparkled in the morning light, and her dark hair floated around her like silk in the water. "Hei-yun, time for your lessons," her mother would call every day. But Hei-yun was often lost in her dreams, imagining what it would be like to feel real rain on her face. Hei-yun had a special friend, an old sea turtle named Master Biol. He was very wise and had lived for hundreds of years. Master Biol would often find Hei-yun floating near the surface, watching the world above. "Little one," he would say, swimming slowly to her side, "why do you spend so much time looking up? There are many wonderful things down here in our kingdom." "But Master Biol," Hei-yun would reply, her eyes still fixed on the surface, "don't you think it's amazing how the rain makes circles on the water? Each drop tells a different story." Master Biol would shake his head and smile. "Yes, but remember what your grandmother always says. The surface world is dangerous for merfolk like us." Hei-yun knew the rules well. No mermaid or merman was allowed to go near humans. It was the most important law of their kingdom. But she couldn't help wondering why. One day, while exploring a new cave she had found, Hei-yun discovered something exciting. Hidden behind some rocks was an old chest filled with human things. There were small round objects that ticked, flat things with markings on them, and strange tools she had never seen before. Her heart beat faster as she picked up each item. These treasures were different from the usual shells and pearls that other mermaids collected. Each object seemed to tell a story about the mysterious world above. "What are you doing here?" a voice suddenly asked, making Hei-yun jump. She turned around to see her younger sister, Mermaid, swimming at the cave entrance. Mermaid's purple tail swished back and forth nervously. "Please don't tell Mother," Hei-yun begged. "I just want to learn about them." Mermaid looked at the human objects with wide eyes. "You could get in big trouble," she whispered, but then smiled. "But I won't tell. I know how much you love these things." Hei-yun hugged her sister tight. Together, they spent the afternoon looking at all the strange treasures. Hei-yun made up stories about each object, imagining how humans used them in their world. As the sun began to set, turning the ocean waters golden, Hei-yun put everything back in the chest carefully. But she kept one small object, a round thing with a glass front that pointed in different directions. She didn't know it was called a compass, but she felt it was special. That night, as she lay in her bed, Hei-yun held the compass close and watched the moonlight play on her ceiling. She knew in her heart that someday she would learn more about the world above. Someday, she would understand why rain made her feel so alive. Master Biol's words echoed in her mind. "Be careful what you wish for, little dreamer. Some dreams can change your life forever." Hei-yun smiled, not knowing just how right her old friend would turn out to be. The summer storms had arrived at Jeju Island. Dark clouds filled the sky, and heavy rain fell on the ocean. For Hei-yun, this was the most wonderful time of the year. The sound of rain hitting the water's surface was like music to her ears. On this stormy day, Hei-yun noticed something different. A small fishing boat was fighting against the big waves above. She knew she should swim away. It was against all rules to be near human boats, but something made her stay and watch. The waves grew bigger and bigger. The little boat moved up and down like a toy in the water. Through the stormy water, Hei-yun could see 3 people on the boat. They were trying hard to turn their boat toward the shore. Suddenly, a massive wave hit the boat. Hei-yun heard screams from above. To her horror, she saw someone fall into the angry ocean. It was a young man, probably not much older than she was. He was trying to swim, but the waves were too strong. Hei-yun's heart beat fast. She knew the most important rule of her people: never let humans see you. But as she watched the young man sink deeper into the dark water, she couldn't just swim away. "I'm sorry, Master Bio," she whispered and swam quickly toward the drowning human. The young man had stopped moving when she reached him. Hei-yun wrapped her arms around him and pulled him up toward the surface. He was heavy, and the storm made it hard to swim, but she was strong. When they broke through the waves, Hei-yun could see his face clearly. He had kind features and dark hair that was now stuck to his forehead. She heard people calling from the boat. They were looking for him, but the storm had pushed the boat far away. Hei-yun knew she had to get him to shore quickly. She held his head above water and swam as fast as her tail could move. The beach wasn't far, but every second counted. She could feel his body getting colder. Finally, they reached the shallow water near the beach. Hei-yun carefully pulled him onto the sand, just far enough from the waves. She noticed he was wearing something around his neck, a small glass ball with a tiny blue flower inside. The young man started to cough, and Hei-yun knew she had to leave. But something made her wait just a moment longer. His eyes began to open slowly. Who are you?" he asked in a weak voice. Hei-yun panicked. No human was supposed to see her. She quickly slipped back into the waves, but not before he reached out and touched her hand. "Wait," he called out, but Hei-yun was already underwater, her heart pounding. From beneath the surface, she watched as people from the beach ran to help him. She learned later that his name was Do-hyun, and he was the son of a local fisherman. That night, Hei-yun couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Do-hyun's eyes and how they had looked at her with wonder, not fear. She touched the hand he had reached for, remembering how warm his touch had felt despite the cold rain. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself in her room. Breaking the most important rule of her people would surely bring trouble, but when she closed her eyes, she didn't see danger. She saw Do-hyun's kind face and the tiny blue flower in the glass ball around his neck. Little did Hei-yun know, but on the shore above, Do-hyun was also awake, touching the glass ball necklace and trying to remember more about the mysterious girl with silver scales who had saved his life in the storm. 3 days after saving Do-hyun, Hei-yun could think of nothing else. She spent hours in the palace library, reading old books about the surface world. Her friend Kita, a young merman who worked in the library, watched her with worry in his eyes. "You've been reading for days," Kita said, swimming over to her table. "What are you looking for?" Hei-yun looked up from her book. "I need to understand more about humans," she said softly. "There must be a way to learn about them safely." Kaita pushed his glasses up his nose and sat next to her. "Hei-yun, I know that look. You're planning something dangerous, aren't you?" Before she could answer, they heard a noise. An old book had fallen from a high shelf. Its pages were yellow, and the cover was made of ancient seashells. Hei-yun picked it up carefully and read the title, Magic of the Rain. Her hand shook as she opened the book. Inside, she found something amazing, a spell that could turn a merperson into a human, but only when it rained. Kitai read over her shoulder, his face growing pale. "Hei-yun, this is forbidden magic," he whispered. "Look at the warning." The warning was clear. Each time a merperson used the spell, it would take away some of their life force. And if they didn't return to the sea before the rain stopped, they would turn into sea foam forever. "This is too dangerous," Kita said. "Promise me you won't try it." But Hei-yun couldn't promise. She copied the spell onto a piece of seaweed paper and hid it in her room. That night, she read it again and again. The spell seemed simple. She needed 3 things: a raindrop from the surface, a scale from her tail, and something from the human world. Hei-yun touched the compass she had found in the cave. She already had one thing she needed. Getting a raindrop would be easy during the rainy season, but taking a scale from her tail would hurt. The next morning, Hei-yun visited Master Bail. she found him resting in his coral garden. "Master Biol," she said, "what if someone had a chance to follow their dreams, but it was dangerous?" The old turtle looked at her closely. "Dreams can be like the tide, little one. They can carry us to wonderful places, but they can also pull us too far from shore." "But what if the dream feels right in your heart?" Heian asked. Master Biol sighed. "Then you must be ready for whatever comes with that dream, good or bad." Heian spent the rest of the day thinking. She watched her sister Mireille playing with friends, saw her mother teaching young merchildren to sing, and helped her brother Ta Wu guard the palace gates. She loved her family and her home. Was she ready to risk everything? That evening, a storm came. Heian swam to a quiet cave. She held the compass in one hand and caught a raindrop in a shell with the other. Then, closing her eyes tight, she pulled a silver scale from her tail. It hurt, but she didn't cry out. "This is my choice," she whispered, and began to read the spell. As she spoke the magic words, the raindrop, scale, and compass began to glow. A strange feeling spread through her body. It felt like thousands of bubbles were bursting all around her. Heian didn't know if she was making a terrible mistake, but as the magic worked its way through her, she thought of Du Hyun's kind eyes and the world she wanted to understand. Sometimes, she decided, the biggest risk was never taking a chance at all. The magic spell worked in ways Heian had never imagined. As the rain fell around her, she felt her silver tail change into human legs. The feeling was strange but not painful. She found herself standing in shallow water near the beach, wearing a simple blue dress that the magic had created for her. Taking her first steps was difficult. Her new legs felt weak, like seaweed swaying in the current. Heian held onto nearby rocks as she learned to walk. Each step became a little easier than the last. On walking, she whispered in amazement, wiggling her toes in the wet sand. The rain felt wonderful on her skin, different from how it felt underwater. Each drop was like a tiny kiss from the sky. Heian had chosen the perfect day for her first visit to the human world. It was a market day in the coastal village, and many people were out despite the gentle rain. They carried colorful umbrellas and wore rain boots. No one paid much attention to the young woman walking slowly along the street. The market was full of wonderful things. Heian saw tables covered with fresh fruit, breads that smelled delicious, and beautiful handmade items. Everything was new and exciting. She wished she could share this moment with Kita or Mireille. Then she saw him. Du Hyun was working at a fish stall, helping his father sell the morning's catch. He was smiling as he talked to customers, and the glass ball with the blue flower still hung around his neck. Heian's heart beat faster. She walked closer to his stall, pretending to look at the fish. Du Hyun noticed her and smiled. "Would you like to buy some fish?" he asked kindly. "These were caught fresh this morning." I've never bought fish before," Heian said truthfully. She had practiced speaking above water, but it still felt strange. Du Hyun laughed. "Never? Are you new to our village?" "I'm Du Hyun." "Yes, I'm new. My name is Enji," Heian said, using the human name she had chosen. "I love the sea very much." "So do I," Du Hyun said. He touched the glass ball around his neck. "Especially since a few days ago, something amazing happened during the storm. You probably won't believe me, but try me," Heian said softly. "I believe in amazing things." Do Hyun's father called him just then, asking for help with a customer. "Will you come back to the market?" Du Hyun asked quickly. "I'd like to tell you my story." "I'll come when it rains," Heian promised. She knew she could only return during rainy days. As she walked away, Du Hyun called out, "I like the rain too. Most people complain about it, but I think rainy days are magical." Heian smiled, knowing he was more right than he realized. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the village, learning about human life. She saw children playing in puddles, watched old women gossip under their umbrellas, and listened to street musicians play beautiful music. But she also kept checking the sky. The rain was getting lighter. Hei-yun remembered the warning. She must return to the sea before the rain stopped. With one last look at the market, she hurried back to the beach. Just as she reached the water, the rain began to stop. Hei-yun dove beneath the waves, feeling her legs change back into her tail. She was tired, and could feel that the magic had taken some of her strength. But her heart was full of joy. That night, as she lay in her bed beneath the sea, Hei-yun touched her feet where her human legs had been. "I'll see you again, Do-hyun," she whispered, "next time it rains." As weeks passed, Hei-yun visited the surface world whenever it rained. Each time she transformed, she felt a little more tired afterward. The magic was slowly taking its toll, just as the spell had warned. Mirai noticed the changes in her sister first. One morning, she found Hei-yun sleeping late, something she had never done before. "Sister, are you feeling well?" Mirai asked, touching Hei-yun's forehead. "Your colors seem less bright today." Hei-yun tried to smile. "I'm just a little tired, that's all." But she knew it was more than that. The magic was taking away small pieces of her life force each time she became human. Despite her growing weakness, Hei-yun couldn't stay away from the surface. She and Do-hyun had become close friends. On rainy days, they would walk through the village together. Do-hyun taught her about human life, and Hei-yun shared her knowledge of the sea, being careful not to reveal too much. "You know so much about the ocean," Do-hyun said one rainy afternoon as they sat under the shelter of his father's fish shop. "Sometimes I think you must be part fish yourself." Hei-yun's heart jumped at his words. "What makes you say that?" "Well, you only come when it rains, and you understand the sea in a way most people don't," he said. Then he touched the glass ball necklace he always wore, "like the girl who saved me in the storm. I never told you that story, did I?" Hei-yun shook her head, though she knew it well. As Do-hyun described his rescue, she wanted so badly to tell him the truth. But she remembered Master Byul's warnings about the dangers of humans knowing about merfolk. Back in the underwater palace, things were becoming more complicated. Ki-ta watched Hei-yun with worried eyes as she spent more time reading about human customs in the library. "You're using that spell, aren't you?" he asked one day when they were alone. "I can see how it's affecting you." "I'm being careful," Hei-yun promised. But even as she said it, she felt tired to her bones. That evening, Hei-yun's mother called her to the royal dining room. "The queen wants to see all young merfolk tomorrow," she announced. "She says it's time to choose who will train to become future leaders of our kingdom." Hei-yun's stomach turned into knots. As a member of a noble family, she was expected to take on important duties. How could she do that if she kept visiting the surface world? Later that night, she heard soft singing coming from her sister's room. Mirai was singing an old merfolk song about a pearl that tried to be both a stone and a star, until it broke in two. "I know what you're doing," Mirai said when Hei-yun came in. "I've followed you sometimes. I've seen you become human." Hei-yun froze. "Mirai, please don't tell anyone." "I won't," her sister said. "But you're like that pearl in the song. You can't be two things forever without breaking." Mirai hugged her tightly. "I don't want to lose my sister." As Hei-yun lay in bed that night, she heard thunder above. Another storm was coming. Her heart pulled her toward the surface, toward Do-hyun, but her body felt so weak. She thought of Mirai's words about the pearl breaking in two. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to the dark water around her. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to keep living in both worlds. The ocean knew before anyone else that danger was coming. Deep under the waves, the fish swam in strange patterns. The dolphins left the area, and the seabirds flew far inland. Hei-yun's brother Tawu, who led the palace guards, noticed these signs first. "Something big is coming," Tawu told the Queen's Council. "The sea creatures are warning us." The council members gathered around a large pearl that showed images of the ocean currents. The patterns were changing. A massive typhoon was heading straight for their kingdom and the human village above. Hei-yun listened from behind a coral pillar as the council made plans to protect the underwater city. They would use magic to strengthen the coral walls and move everyone to the deep caves until the storm passed. But no one mentioned helping the humans above. That evening, Hei-yun waited until dark and swam to the surface. Even without rain, she could peek above the waves. The sky looked strange. Dark clouds stretched as far as she could see, and the wind was getting stronger. From her hiding place behind some rocks, she saw Do-hyun and his father pulling their fishing boat onto the beach. Other villagers were boarding up their windows and carrying supplies to safer places. The weather service says this could be the biggest storm in 50 years. Hei-yun heard someone say, "We should all leave the coast." Hei-yun's heart felt heavy. The humans didn't know how bad this storm would really be. The merfolk's magic pearls could see things that human weather tools couldn't see. She swam back home quickly and found Kita in the library. "I need your help," she said. "We have to warn them." "Warn who?" asked a voice. Hei-yun turned to see Ta-woo standing in the doorway. Her brother's face was serious. "No one," Hei-yun said quickly, but Ta-woo came closer. "Sister, I've known something was wrong for weeks," he said. "You disappear when it rains. You come back looking tired. And now I find you talking about warning someone." Hei-yun looked at Kita, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and told her brother everything. About saving Do-hyun, using the transformation spell, and her visits to the surface. Ta-woo listened without speaking. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You broke our most important law," he finally said. "As head guard, I should report this to the queen." "But as my brother?" Hei-yun asked softly. Ta-woo touched the guard's badge on his chest. "As your brother, I'm worried about you, and now you want to risk everything to help the humans." "They'll die if we don't warn them," Hei-yun said. "The typhoon is worse than they know. Please, help me save them." Before Ta-woo could answer, the palace bells started ringing. The storm was getting closer. Through the palace windows, they could see merfolk swimming toward the deep caves, carrying their belongings. "We don't have much time," Kita said. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now." Ta-woo looked at his guard's badge again, then at his sister. "If we help them, we'll all be breaking the law. Are you sure about this?" Hei-yun thought about Do-hyun, his father, and all the villagers she had met. "Some laws are meant to protect us," she said, "but maybe some laws need to change." Thunder rumbled above, so loud they could hear it underwater. The biggest storm anyone could remember was coming, and Hei-yun had to choose between following the laws of her people or saving those she had grown to care about. The typhoon arrived with a fury no one had seen before. Giant waves crashed against the shore, and the wind howled like 1,000 angry spirits. Hei-yun, Ta-woo, and Kita had made their choice. They would help both worlds. Ta-woo used his position as head guard to organize teams of strong merfolk. They worked underwater, using their magic to protect both the Sea Kingdom and the foundations of the human village above. Kita discovered old spells in the library that could strengthen the seawalls. Above the water, Hei-yun used the transformation spell one more time. The rain was so heavy that she didn't even need to catch a drop. The magic worked instantly. But this time, the transformation hurt more than ever before. She could feel her life force draining quickly. In the village, most people had left for safer places, but some had stayed behind. Do-hyun and his father were helping the last families leave when Hei-yun found them. "Yunji," Do-hyun called when he saw her. "You need to get to safety." "I came to help," Hei-yun said, her voice almost lost in the wind. She knew where the waves would hit hardest, thanks to her brother's information. She guided people away from the most dangerous areas. The storm grew stronger. Trees bent in the wind, and parts of the pier began breaking apart. Hei-yun felt weaker with each passing minute. The magic was taking too much from her, but she couldn't stop now. Then she saw something that made her heart stop. Do-hyun's father had gone to help an old couple, but their path was blocked by fallen trees. The waves were getting bigger, and Hae-yun could sense an enormous one coming, the kind that could sweep them all away. Do-hyun, she called out, get your father and the others away from the shore. A big wave is coming. How do you know? Do-hyun asked, but there was no time to explain. Hae-yun ran toward the old couple. Her legs felt like they were turning to water. The spell was wearing off. The giant wave was approaching, taller than the buildings. Without thinking, Hae-yun did the only thing she could do. In front of Do-hyun, his father, and the old couple, Hae-yun let her human form fade away. Her tail returned, shimmering silver even in the dark storm. Using all her merfolk strength, she pushed a broken piece of the pier toward them. Hold on to this, she shouted. The wave is coming. Do-hyun's eyes went wide with recognition. It was you, he whispered. In the storm that day, it was you all along. The massive wave crashed over them. Underwater, Hae-yun could see clearly. She helped push the piece of pier with everyone holding onto it toward safer ground. When they surfaced, they were past the dangerous area. Hae-yun knew she should swim away now that they had seen her true form, but she was too weak. The magic had taken too much of her life force. She felt herself starting to fade, like the spell had warned, turning slowly into sea foam. No. Do-hyun swam toward her. Don't go. He reached for her hand, just like he had done during their first meeting in the storm. This time, Hae-yun didn't pull away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth, she said softly. The truth doesn't matter, Do-hyun said, still holding her hand. What matters is who you are, someone who risks everything to help others. As Hae-yun felt herself growing weaker, she saw more shapes moving under the water. Her brother Tawu, Kita, and even Master Beidel were swimming up from the depths. They had come to help, but would they be in time to save her? Just as Hae-yun felt herself fading into sea foam, something wonderful happened. Queen Sun-hee herself rose from the waves, her golden tail shining even in the dark storm. The queen carried an ancient pearl that glowed with powerful magic. My people, the queen's voice rang out over the storm. Today we have seen great courage from both worlds. The queen touched the glowing pearl to Hae-yun's tail. Warmth spread through Hae-yun's body, stopping her from turning into sea foam. Her strength began to return. Young Hae-yun broke our laws, the queen continued, looking at the humans who watched in amazement. But sometimes old laws must change when hearts prove true. Do-hyun's father stepped forward, still holding the piece of pier. Your people saved our lives today, he said. We owe you our thanks. The storm began to calm as Queen Sun-hee raised the pearl high. Its light spread across the waves, making the water smooth and gentle. The terrible typhoon faded away like a bad dream. Perhaps, the queen said, it is time for our worlds to meet properly. In the days that followed, amazing things happened. The queen created new laws that allowed merfolk to visit the surface world safely. She gave Hae-yun a special pearl that let her change between human and mermaid without losing her life force. The pearl was set into a necklace that matched Do-hyun's glass ball with the blue flower. The people of the village welcomed their new neighbors with open hearts. They learned that helping each other made both communities stronger. The merfolk taught humans how to predict storms better and where to find fish without catching too many. The humans shared their music, stories, and ways of keeping the ocean clean. Hae-yun became a bridge between the two worlds. She spent her mornings teaching young merfolk about human customs in the underwater palace. In the afternoons, she worked with Do-hyun at his family's fish shop, teaching humans about the sea's mysteries. She didn't have to wait for rain anymore to walk on land. Kita opened a special section in the merfolk library for human books, which he protected from the water with magic. Taiwu trained both merfolk and human lifeguards to work together, making the beaches safer for everyone. Mireille loved playing with human children, teaching them to swim better and showing them the pretty places where fish like to hide. Master Biol became everyone's favorite storyteller, sharing wise tales from both land and sea. One evening, Hei-yun and Du-hyun sat on the beach watching the sunset. She wore her magic pearl necklace, and he still had his glass ball with the blue flower. "Do you ever miss how things were before?" Du-hyun asked, "when everything was separate." Hei-yun smiled and touched her tail to the waves. "I think things are better now," she said. "The best stories are the ones we write together." From that day on, the coastal village became known as a place where magic still lived. On quiet nights, people said they could hear merfolk singing with the fishermen's children. The sea and shore were no longer two different worlds, but one community where everyone belonged. And sometimes, when the rain fell softly on the waves, Hei-yun would remember the first day she dared to dream of walking on land. Her dream had come true in ways she never expected, proving that the most magical stories are the ones where brave hearts choose love over fear.